There we go, nice and tight. Done. Okay, this is Future Dave coming in during the editing process. First of all, we're obviously breaking this video up into at least 2, maybe 3 parts. But second, in between the time when I finished the first mount and started the second mount, in cleaning up, I knocked over my tripod and broke my main shooting camera. So everything you see from here on out will have been shot on a backup phone. The quality isn't always the best, and the angles aren't always as tight as I'd like, but we did the best we could under not ideal circumstances. So with that, let's get on with the driver's side mount and the rear shocks. Okay, we're looking directly underneath the car. Here is our mount that we're going to replace. And then here is the, well, move around a little bit here. There's one bolt we got to replace. There's the remove. There is, in the shadows by the light, that's the other bolt, and that's the other bolt we got to loosen. I'm directly underneath the car here, and I'm thinking I'm going to remove this bolt right here and get an idea of its length, and if it's as long or not as long as I think it is, we're going to see if I need to jack up the engine just a little bit to let that bolt get clearance to come out. Because the only other way I see of getting to that bolt, it's obstructed by a big wiring loom right here. And that wiring loom goes back to the air filter box that leads to the inflow that connects to the MAF assembly, the MAF bracket up at the top on the intake. I really don't want to have to take all that stuff out. So if I can get to it from underneath here, I think that would be better, but we'll see. But I may need to jack up the transmission a little bit to try it, and that's very difficult to see because of the glare. Yeah, that's the first bolt. So I'm gonna get my floor jack, and we're gonna just brace the transmission over here on this side. I'm gonna get a plank of wood, so I just support it over here, not on the flat part, but just along here on the side, and see if that gives us an opportunity to figure out how much we have to move the transmission to get that top bolt out. I've had another little interesting discovery. I have been working on this bolt, that bolt up there, but what I just discovered on the other side of this protruding area on this bracket, there's another bolt, and I don't begin to know how in the world I'm going to get there. It's interesting because I studied a little bit about this car and this particular mount, and what I had read was that there were only 3 bolts. And I'm thinking there's some particular difference in the way this particular car was built out, or the model year, or something that's different, because that 4th bolt right there is not something I'd come across. And how I'm going to get to that, I don't see any path to that bolt this way, because I could barely get my fingers in there. The only thing I can imagine is if I loosen this bolt and see how much weight of the transaxle is actually transferred to this bracket right here, and see if that allows the entire transaxle to drop a little bit to even begin to free this. Otherwise, I'm going to have to figure out a way to get to that bolt from up top. There's no other way around it. So I'm going to have to do a little bit of checking, a little bit of snooping, and you'll reconvene shortly. So here is a top side view. That's the top bolt to that bracket that you can see right there. And you can see how narrow the clearances are. And it's hard to tell how much play there is on this little metal fitting to see if there's enough room for that bolt to clear. You might be able to see right there, I'm pretty sure that's the other, I can't tell for sure, the shadows are a little funky. But there's the second bolt that I have a clear shot from up here to access. But even getting it started down there, I'm gonna have to be able to thread it back when I put the bracket back. So this is going to be tricky. I think we're going to have a combination of upside and bottom side access to have any hope of getting this thing loose. And I'm going to start by taking what I believe is I believe that bottom bolt is a 21 millimeter bolt off the bottom of the mount. So I'm going to start there and see if that causes the transaxle unit to lower any. That may or may not help. I'm not sure. Okay. I'm looking at this from the opposite side. That's the lower bolt on that bracket. It's a little hard to see. I may have to highlight it in the video. That's the bolt I got to get to. The one in the foreground, that's the bottom of the mount. The one behind it is the bracket. So I think what I'm going to have to do, absolutely, I can get to it from this side. It'll be a little tricky, but I can get to it. But I don't know that I've got the clearance to get that bolt out. So I think the first thing I've got to do, without question, is take this bolt, get it in frame. No, come on. The first thing I've got to do is to get that bolt lowered to see if that causes the bracket to lower some and increase the clearance on some of these brackets to get the bolts out. So that's going to be step one. Pretty sure that's 21 or 22 millimeters, and we'll spin that puppy out. Well, since my other camera has kind of died unexpectedly, I thought I could make it work. We're going to have to wing this, and it's not going to be as good a quality as I would like. Next thing we're going to do is I'm going to work up from the top here. That's an 18 millimeter bolt. I'm going to try to loosen that and get it as far out as I can with the other two bolts out. We're also going to take out this bracket to free up at least a little bit more access to the other bolt that goes back to the transmission mount. This is just like what we did on the other side. This mechanism is virtually identical, aside from the fact that it's a mirror image. So we're going to spin that bolt loose. This little bracket right here has a hook that engages the other side of this collar. So we'll pull the bolt out, loosen the collar, release this bracket, and then slide this out, and that will hopefully free us up for a little bit better access to that far bolt on the other side. So I don't know that I'll be able to film a bunch of this. I'll do the best I can. Didn't expect my other camera to kind of crater on me. I thought I had gotten it where it was workable. Yeah, relieving that bracket's going to help some, but it's not going to help a lot. But we'll see what we can do. Okay, I have that collar off of the mount, and I think this is an illustration of where some videos and some instructional help stuff will tell you one thing, but reality teaches you something different. I now have a clear shot with my 18 millimeter ratcheting flex head wrench to get to that last bolt holding that bracket onto the transaxle. The only problem is there's no way in the world I have enough swing to begin to get the kind of leverage I need to loosen that bolt. Okay, that's just the bottom line. Now, maybe it's because I'm a weak noodle guy. I freely admit I'm totally a weak noodle. So stronger guys may not have any trouble with that at all. But I bring this wrench back here, and I try to pull this thing forward. I'm already hitting against the brake line right here. But if I go down, I'm hitting the CV axle. So I've got no room to swing. So maybe there's a magic trick. Maybe if I turn it this way, I've got a little bit more room. I don't know. But here's what I think I'm going to do. After having removed that collar, it's a little bit tricky to see, especially with the lighting being less than optimal because my other camera is fritzed out. There is a line. You can't tell from here, but there is a line of sight access to that remaining bolt. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my 18mm wrench on the end of a long extension, and you just can't see it in this light. I'm going to put the 18mm wrench on the end of a long extension with my regular ratchet and just put some serious elbow grease in there and see if I can get that thing out. We'll see. It has been an adventure, but the bracket is finally loose from the transaxle. It required some of the hardest basic wrenching I have ever tried to exert. I finally was able to leverage an 18mm ratcheting socket, and then ratcheting end wrench, and then I hooked another wrench to the end of that to gain myself some leverage, and I basically got it on there and turned until my shoulder just about exploded. And finally, I felt it give. It gave and gave and gave. And after about 4,600,000,000 revolutions, it finally came out. I almost trapped the 18mm wrench in the bolt as it came out against the interior of the chassis, but I managed to get it loose. That left the top bolt. I had hoped that I would be able simply to loosen that bolt and let it ride captive up top out of the actual transmission, but just resting in the bracket and then jiggle it loose. Well, no such luck. I tried a variety of different ways to get that top bolt loose, and it simply wasn't going to cooperate. It was bouncing again against this interior frame, interior chassis, body, whatever you want to call it. And it would not let the top bolt free. So I finally realized I needed about a half an inch. So I got my handy dandy jack, put a little plop of wood up there, popped it up about a half an inch, and that lifted the transmission enough where the screw came out, the bolt fell down, and we are now loose. I have already taken the 18mm bolt off of this side, and I just need to take the 18mm bolt off of that side, and then take this bolt, which really shouldn't be here, off of this side. That's why I think this mount was replaced once before by someone who didn't do it right. I have no idea. My mom's had this car for 19 years, and she might have had, I offered to do work for her and she wouldn't let me until the last few years. So she could easily have had this done and I didn't know it. And I don't think it was either replaced with the wrong part or the person who replaced it replaced this bolt incorrectly. I'm not sure. I won't know until I take this bolt off. But the next step is to take the other 18mm bolt holding this off, take this bolt off, and get this stinking nuisance thing out of here, and then put the new one in and reverse and get this thing done. Not able to video quite as much live as I would like since the other camera died, so it'll be accomplishment and explanation. Not my ideal or preferred way of doing it, but that's about the best I can do for right now. So we'll be back in touch in just a little bit. The old mount is out. It is dented and cracked on the inside, but I'm not sure if this qualifies totally as broken. It looks cracked, so it might not be as efficient as it was originally, and I was also able to confirm that yes, some Yahoo has been here before. Because look, see the little eyelet hook? See that goes through this bolt? This eyelet is supposed to be over here. That means one of two things. I can't get this bolt out with the transmission installed. That means one of two things. It means that either this car was assembled incorrectly from the factory, which is possible, or during a trip to the local Buick dealer, which is where my mom typically had most of her work done. They did something that caused the transmission to get dropped, and they replaced the mount, and they put the screw back on backwards. I'll never know. There is literally no way I can get that bolt out. I mean, it's not possible. I suppose, strictly speaking, I could get an angle grinder and I could cut through that bolt, assuming I could get up there in that area and hack that bolt off. But I just not going to do that. I'm just going to I'm just going to put the new bolt, the new mount on here like this, and then reassemble it and call it good. But man, that's frustrating. Here is the new mount. Okay, at least show you getting it hooked back in where it belongs. There. Now it's just a matter of putting the old bolts back on. Got a makeshift temporary rig to use my old phone as a recording device, so we're going to get at least some video out of this. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be better than nothing. All that we're doing now is basically we're just reversing the process. We're just reassembling everything, assuming I haven't lost any parts along the way, which, the way things have gone, is not impossible. There's that one. This one's going to be trickier. There we go. Now, with the 218, and I haven't yet, I got to find the nut for this guy to get it bolted in. All we've got to do now is we're going to take this evil, nasty monster, and we'll line this back up. Get one of the bolts started up at the top, because that was the one that was giving us all the grief before. Because I elevated the transmission, we should have room to get this started, this one started, and this one started, but accessing this one may be a little bit problematic until after we get the bracket in position and then attach it to here. So we may have to go through a couple of gyrations to get it all put back together. But we're going to take the 22 millimeter bolt, and we'll at least get this one started. And that's going to give us a starting hole for that bolt and the bolt on the other side. Okay, I didn't realize I had started to video this and realized I didn't hit the record button on my phone. It has been every bit of an hour or 45 minutes with this ridiculous ballet step sequence of lifting the transmission and lowering the transmission and shifting the transmission and starting the screw in the top bracket hole, knowing that it will not catch any threads until you lower it a little bit to get it started, but it won't be straight, so you cannot force it. It will not go in. You'll cross-thread it and ruin it, assuming you can get it to go in at all. But then once you get it started, and at like a half a turn, maybe one turn, then you lower it. It allows the bracket to then fit face flat on the face of the back of the transaxle, and then you can start turning the threads. This has been a crazy, that screw is too long to come out on its own. You can't just put the thing in. So in order to get it out, I had to lift the transmission up. That allowed enough freedom for the whole bracket to fall out. So I have to essentially reverse that to put it back in. I have to start the screw, the one that you see in frame there, that one right there. You've got to start that in at least the hole in the top of the bracket, slide the bracket in, and then get it where it catches on the actual hole in the transaxle where it's supposed to go. And maybe try to turn a half a thread, maybe one thread, but no more. Because if you're lined up enough where it might catch, it's still crooked. The holes are not properly lined up and you risk cross-threading it. Once you get it such that it's caught, and besides that, the head of the screw starts running against the bottom of some brake lines up there that you can't see, then you lower the transmission. And then when you lower the transmission, it lines up the bolt with the bolt hole, and then you can start using a regular wrench, open-end wrench, to slowly put those threads back in. There's not enough room to put a ratcheting end wrench in there, at least not yet. Maybe there will be when I tighten it. But this has been a crazy quilt of lifting the transmission to get the bolt out, starting it back in the bracket, and then lowering the transmission to get the bolt holes to line up, and only then can you really start to thread it back together. And what's really a kicker is once the bracket is reattached, I'll need to lift the transmission again to get the bottom of this bracket to bottom out against this bolt right here before I put on the last minute, the 21 millimeter fastener that goes back down here. So there's really no benefit in my trying to film this kind of detail. I mean, it's basically a guy turning a wrench, which is almost as boring as watching paint dry. So I'll come back when I have the bolts for the bracket all in place. Okay, here's the update. I have all 4 bracket bolts in. They're in as tight as I am physically able to make them, and there is no earthly way I can get a torque wrench in there. I can probably get a torque wrench on that guy right there, but that's it. There's simply no way I can torque the rest of these bolts. And they are on there as tight as I'm no strong guy, but they're as tight as I can make them. So all that's left is to put the 18 millimeter nuts onto the studs that secure it this way. There's a 21 millimeter nut that we will put on after we jack up the transmission to let this bracket butt to the bottom of the mount, and then we're going to put that screw back, and we're finally going to be done with this nightmare. So give us a few and we'll reconvene in a few minutes. Well, folks, after considerable wailing and gnashing of teeth, the new motor mount on the driver's side is done. Even the little collar on the mount here gave me grief because for some reason it just didn't want to work together, but it finally did. I started this at about 9. It's almost 6. This has been a 9-hour project, and I haven't stopped. I suppose I've stopped maybe a grand total of an hour, and that's in 2 trips to try to get a better quality, better angle wrench, trying to figure out how to get more leverage on things. And most of the stuff that I went through to get this part done are just sheer brute force. But it's done.